here in Washington, US business groups are fighting the Trump administration's proposed multi-million-dollar fees on Chinese ships entering US ports. At hearings this week, American shipping operators warned the plan could harm exports and cost jobs, despite its aim to boost US shipbuilding. The Trump administration says those fees on Chinese ships are meant to encourage US shipbuilding, but the country is already dealing with ailing infrastructure when it comes to ports and trade. It's been exactly 1 year since a bridge in Baltimore was struck by a ship and collapsed. The disaster disrupted a critical US trade hub and raised concerns about ageing infrastructure. For more on everything trade, tariffs and infrastructure, let's bring in Joseph Williams, former senior editor at the US News and World Report. Welcome back, Joseph. Good to see you. How has the collapse of the Baltimore Bridge impacted shipping routes and supply chains over the past year?
Well, immediately after the crash, there was a backlog. Ships couldn't get in and out of Baltimore. Baltimore was one of the most prolific ports in auto import and export, so it caused supply chain shocks all up and down the East Coast. Since then, they've since recovered, but there's still a lot of wariness out there. There are still a lot of anxious ship owners and operators that are worried whether or not this thing will happen again, because American infrastructure is not where it should be. It's not even close to where it should be, and there has to be a lot of infrastructure upgrades in order to make people more comfortable shipping in and out of the United States. Now, the Baltimore Harbor bridge collapse was a wake-up call. The question is whether or not America has answered, or if we're still snoozing.
Well, I imagine there'd be a lot of bridges with similar kinds of infrastructure across the country that haven't yet to be addressed with reinforcement. What lessons have been learned from the incident, and how are infrastructure plans being adjusted to try and prevent any future disruptions?
A lot of localities have done similar assessments. There have been reports issued that show a majority of bridges crossing harbors in the United States aren't built to withstand collisions, mainly because a lot of them are median age maybe 15 to 20 years old, and ships have gradually gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and they can't seem to accommodate those ships, because you couldn't imagine in 1973 that you'd have a cargo ship laden with almost 2,000 containers. Back then, the largest ship would have been maybe 100, maybe 200. So that adjustment certainly has been a mathematical one. The other problem that we're facing here is the United States is not keeping up with its infrastructure, not only in upgrades, but in maintenance. So there are a lot more bridges that are out there that are at risk. The third problem that we're facing is that Donald Trump's decimation of the federal government is going to have a lot of problems, because you're seeing the firing of bridge inspectors, of inspectors from the National Transportation and Safety Administration. You're seeing bridge designers and government funding going out the window. So that's going to put us further and further behind if we want to catch up with Asia and Southeast Asia and make the upgrades that will make our harbors safer.
Now, we've heard with the latest round of tariffs from Donald Trump placing up to $1.5 million on vessels docking at various ports around the United States. How do these proposed fees on Chinese-built vessels fit into the broader US trade strategy?
It fits in two ways. The first way is that it's a continuation of Trump's trade war. He's imposed levies on Chinese goods being imported to the United States. This is a part of that. Secondarily, it's intended to jumpstart shipbuilding in the United States, which I'm not really sure it will do, at least not in the short term. Given the fact that it takes years to build a vessel, the United States shipbuilding industry is down to a trickle, and it would take years in order to build up the capacity that we need in order to compete overseas.
Could these fees affect the cost and availability of new ships? And what does that mean for global shipping as a whole?
Well, global shipping as a whole means that there are going to be some operators that are reluctant to come into the United States because they don't want to pay the levy, or if they do want to pay the levy, they'll be passing the costs along to the consumer. So that's going to create shocks up and down the system, where you'll have less profits being hauled in, owners who are reluctant to come to the United States, and they'll find ways around this, but they'll also be passing along those costs to people who are buying things like televisions, stereo sets, and other things that come from overseas, because American manufacturing isn't as strong as it is overseas.
So how are major companies likely to adapt to these kinds of challenges? Are they going to be the ones that are adding, the increase on some of these consumer items?
They are. They're going to be adding increasing costs to consumers. They're going to have to pay the brunt. Consumers are going to have to pay the brunt of this. They may, in fact, have to pay it twice if you have goods coming from China or another country that Trump has levied tariffs upon, and a country that Trump is charging to come in and out of the ports of the United States. So writ large, it's not good news for American consumers. A lot of ship operators and owners are a little bit concerned. They don't know exactly how much this is going to set back their business, and it could contribute to rumblings we're hearing in the distance about a potential recession that could sweep around the globe.
And of course, this is a thorn in the side of tariffs already imposed on China, not to mention Canada and Mexico as well. How do these issues now fit into the larger picture of the US-China economic relations?
Well, they've said it more than once that China is going to be having to face tariffs with goods imported into the United States. No relationship is really very comfortable with that. But having said that, the United States and China are inextricably linked. And we've seen that Trump is willing to be flexible on some partners if they start doing what he likes. What remains to be seen is how Beijing will answer to all these tariffs and these fees that Trump wants to levy. That's the next stage. The ball more or less is in the court of the Chinese and the court of overseas Southeast Asian producers and shippers. Whether or not they'll play ball with the Trump administration or make overtures to try to get these fees removed, that's the next move that I think we should be watching for.
Joseph Williams, as always, really appreciate your time.
Good to be here.